My name is Stephen McCarthy. So I work at the Government Digital Service. Before I start, can I just ask you to put up your hand if you've ever heard of us or the work that we do? All right, so there's quite a few, I reckon about 30% of the audience. But we're a team of about 800 designers, developers, user researchers, data experts, writers. We all work, most of us are based in London in the UK. And for this talk, I'm going to give you a bit of an insight into what we do at GDS. I think it's important to set that context, especially because over half of you don't really know what we do or who we are. Then I'm going to give you a bit of an insight into design and government today, and then I'm going to finish off with some insights into how we optimize our processes for better user-centered delivery. So first of all, actually, I'm going to rewind a bit. So design for UK public services has a long and celebrated history. So we might all know Scott's red phone boxes here, or the big red bus, or the London cab, things like that. But the stuff that I'm going to talk about is the more unheralded big infrastructure projects that for me were the reason why I got into design. So one of these pieces is this here. So this is Jock Kinnear and Margaret Calvert. In the late 50s and early 60s, they developed the first ever standardized road signage system across the UK. And this coincided with how the UK was massively expanding its motorway network. And interestingly enough, this is Margaret Calvert, who, as I said, was the designer of this system. She, in the very early days of GDS, she acted as a consultant for us. And indeed, the typeface that you see on the road signs in the UK is the same typeface that we use on our websites for government digital services. Another project that you might all be familiar with is this. It's probably one of the most ubiquitous map designs you'll ever see in the world. And this was designed in the early 30s by this gentleman here, Harry Beck. And he was a technical draftsman for Transport for London. And he developed this very, very simplified mapping system, which basically he saw at the time that users don't need to understand the geographic location of where they are. They just need to know what the next stations are and where the junctions are in order for me to get from A to B. And that kind of insights and that kind of based on stuff based on user needs, and they need to know what they just need to know something there and then. And this was kind of really, really effective design. Another piece we might all be familiar with is the design system for British Rail. So this was designed by a group of people here called the Design Research Unit in the kind of mid-60s in the UK. And this is really harnessing the power of graphic design to create a more coherent system for the very, very complex UK rail network. The UK probably had one of the most extensive rail networks at the time, and everything was a bit of a mismatch, and users didn't really know where they were going and when. And just using the power of graphic design for things like wayfinding, simplified timetables really helped people day-to-day go about their business. So at GDS, we really feel like we're continuing that legacy. And this legacy of this really kind of infrastructural public sector design. So now I'm going to give you a bit of an insight into what we do at GDS. So first of all, we built this. This is GovUK. This is one website for all the UK government. But GovUK, well, before GovUK existed, the UK government ecosystem of website looked a bit like this. So there was over 300 departmental websites. There was probably, I think we reckon, about 2,000 microsites that spun off that. And as you can imagine, these were all different, and it was a bit of a mess. It was really hard for users to find what they needed to find. There was lots of stuff on there as well that hardly anybody ever read. So we replaced all this with one website called GovUK, as I just mentioned, which means that instead of having lots of different pages of information spread across different URLs, there was just one website for all people, or for all the information that people could kind of get the information quickly. And I know that sounds very simple, but it took a lot of hard work to get there. And, in government, kind of nothing is simple. And the thing is, it's not finished, and to be frank, it never will be. It's always iterating, always improving. And the thing is, government websites were never really built like this before. They were usually built where government would get an agency in, they'd procure a big contractor, they'd spend 6 months probably building this website, and then they'd hand it over, there you go, it's done, it's finished. And then over a course of months and years, the website would simply die of neglect. But at GDS, we work a different way. As I mentioned, we're not an outside agency. We're there in the heart of government. We're a team of, we work in multidisciplinary teams. We're always iterating based on user needs. But something we realized really, really early on in our journey is that the challenge is service transformation. It's not website redesign. And this was something that was really important for us to realize kind of early on in our journey. I've been at GDS about 7.5 years now, and it's something that we kind of often say. So we work with the rest of government to help them make better services. And that doesn't just mean designing websites. It means working on end-to-end service improvement. It means working to improve the relationship between people and government, because it's all about the people. So now I'm going to give you some insights into how we've helped teams around government. So first of all, I'll call this the kind of service-by-service approach. So that's where we gave focus support to specific service teams. So we sent specialists and experts across different government departments all over the UK, like geographically, literally all over the UK, where they acted as consultants, coaches, guides, and leaders. We worked right through all the standard kind of agile development phases, kicking off discoveries, working through alphas, private betas, public betas, right through to live. We initially worked with 25 exemplar programs, kind of high transaction services, and now we've worked on many more since. And this gave us lots and lots of experience about the common problems that service teams around government face. And one thing we really realized early on, that these government teams tend to be fixing the same problems again and again and again. So that led on to our next phase of development at GDS, which was what we call the common platform approach. This meant not looking at government not as a series of silos, each one responsible for its own thing, but government as a series of interconnected, reusable components. So each component does one thing well, and each component is available for every government service to use. We'd always had this intent. For example, GovUK was imagined as a platform for publishing. So we set about creating a set of common platforms that make services easier to use, or to make services easier to use and create and cheaper to run. So this meant things like GovUK Notify, as you can see here. So GovUK Notify allows service teams to easily update users on the progress of their application via text message, emails, and letters. And this small little service has vastly reduced calls and caseworking for government, saving up to about £175 million to the taxpayer on latest estimates. Another thing we built was GovUK Pay. So GovUK Pay, to bring it down to its simplest form, is a common payments platform that makes it easier for users to pay government and easier for service teams to process, refund, and reconcile payments. I've been in some departments of government, and their processes behind the scenes for refund and payments is horrendous, and it takes up to 2 weeks where they're posting different pieces of actual paper from different parts of the organisation to the other before a refund can be issued. Whereas now with this platform that we've built it that you can just, it's simply one button and you can refund the payment to the user. And that's one thing we kind of realised earlier on in this process, is that civil servants are users too, and if we can make their work easier to do, ultimately it'll be better for the user, for the end user. Another thing we developed quite recently is the GovUK design system, which helps you design services using GovUK styles, components, and patterns. And this, like the payment pages I showed you previously, which are fully WCAG 2.1 compliant, are like very accessible that everyone can use. Now with the GovUK design system, out of the box you have WCAG compliant components that service teams can spin up really quickly and start development right from the off, really accessible, easy to use government services. There's lots of components that service teams can use from and pick from. And what this means is that a lot of the hard work has already been done for service teams around government. But most importantly, this means that these teams can focus on the harder, more interesting design problems related to their service. Other things we do to help government teams is around guidance and standards. So one of the early things we developed is that one thing we're actually quite good at GDS is documenting stuff and documenting what you should do, where and when. So this service manual that I'm showing here, this goes into the nuances of everything you need for agile service delivery. So how to build a fully functioning multidisciplinary team, how to work in the different phases of agile delivery, right down to the nuances of this screenshot that I'm showing here, is which how to run research sessions for people with disabilities. And all this stuff is invaluable for service teams. Other things we do, we have a technology code of practice that these teams can look at and how you build safe and secure services. We also have a service standard where if service teams need to get funding for the project, they have to meet these 14 points of the service standard in order to keep going and get funding. And this is really helping to raise the bar for quality services in government. Another really important facet of the work that we do is in training and capability building. The UK has approximately 400,000 civil servants, I think, and we need to raise the bar for them in their understanding of user-centered delivery. So early on, this is Clara Teo here. She's one of our user-centered design training leads. And Clara and her team have trained, I think, about 2,000 civil servants over the last 4 or 5 years, learning what it means to be a designer in government. And we're not saying when these people come out of this training session that they're designers, but at least they better understand the language that we use and how to bring that and start kind of planting that seed in their department. So the things that we teach them are things like the basics of design, or the basics of the different design disciplines, designing based on user needs, the importance of accessibility, and an introduction to prototyping and code. And it's funny how that last one it's really terrifying for people. They just don't understand how that stuff works. So when you break that down to them in really simple forms on a half-a-day training session, it kind of really opens their eyes and it helps them understand the medium that they're working in. So I've shown you some of the things that we do. Now I'm going to take you behind the scenes to what it's like to be a designer in government. So in my role in GDS, I'm the head of design for GDS, but I'm also the head of design for the UK the cross-government UK design community as well. And in that community, we have over 500 designers now, and not all of them work in GDS. We have about 30 in GDS, and then the rest are kind of spread all around the country in different geographic locations, from Plymouth up to Newcastle. It's really important that these people feel like they're part of a community. So this picture here you can see is one of our cross-government design meetups. We run them we try to run them every 2 months in different parts of the country, and we get all the designers in together and talk about the common issues and problems that we're facing. And what's really important is celebrate successes as well. So this community is so important because you might have so in GDS we're quite lucky. We have about 30 designers. We all work together. We can have a coffee and talk about the problems that we're facing. Whereas if you have one designer in a department up in Carlisle, he or she or they might feel quite lonely up there. So it's important that they can get onto Slack. We have a very vibrant Slack channel and Google group, and they can ask us questions straight away, and they can contribute to what is a really dynamic community. So what sort of designers do we employ in government? So we tend to have 4 different specialisms. And specialisms are there just to say that if we think someone needs to fit into a certain phase of delivery or a certain project, we'll put that person there. But everyone kind of tends to work across all the specialisms. But, I'll go through them now. So we have service designers. So to put it simply, service designers design services from end to end and from front to back and in all channels. And in government, much of this is focused on redesigning existing services. And essentially, most government services are a collection of isolated transactions. Many of them predate the internet, for example. And a lot of the work our service designers do are like archaeologists piecing together all these different pieces, all these different kind of transactions within a service and putting them together in a bit of more of a coherent whole, essentially. We also have interaction designers. So interaction designers design the detailed actions a user needs to make in order to use a service. So that's not just the UI. That might be the exact pacing of a number of questions within the transaction, or where to put a login, for example. To put it simply, interaction designers refine and shape user journeys and help remove complexity where it isn't needed. The third discipline we have is graphic designers. To be honest, there aren't many graphic designers in government. I'm from a graphic design background, but they play a crucial role. So if I was to say it, like graphic design, I find, is an enabler for content and interaction design by influencing how users understand and interact with information. The next discipline we have, which is probably the biggest design discipline in government, is content designers. So content designers, to put it simply, deal with words, and words in government services are hugely important because most of them are words. They communicate complex information in simple, plain English. that the user can understand quickly. And the vast majority of our services, as I mentioned, are made up of words. So it's really important that we get this right. So all the designers that we have, we kind of tend to work in the same way. And one thing is really important is that we build things. We don't just, create pretty pictures or UI interfaces and hand them over the wall. We actually understand the medium we're working in. Most of our designers can code, or at least understand the facets of code. We build, we work in a realistic manner, and we know how our things are going to be built. This one's really important is that we work collaboratively and in the open. We have very dynamic and vibrant blog channels. We talk about our successes. We have an opinion on the internet about how our stuff should work and how we approach the work that we do. We have as I mentioned earlier, we have a vibrant community that are constantly challenging each other on whether or not we're doing the right thing with certain design patterns or certain ways the ways we're doing things. We're constantly questioning the work that we do. This one again is really important, is that user research is a separate discipline. We don't have what you might see as the standard UX designer model where the UX designer does both the research and the design. We feel understanding the needs of every citizen in the UK is its own job entirely, and especially we don't want their designers to be marking their own homework. So designers and researchers work together all the time, but they're separate disciplines. And then the other thing is that all our designers are expected to spot problems and try to fix them. We don't want to hear things like, the designer on your team is very nice, they did everything that we asked them, it was really cool. That's not the role of designer. The role of designer is always in a team is to always ask why, and that's what we promote our designers to do. And the other thing is our designers work across all the delivery phases here. So they work from discovery through to alpha, through to public and private betas, and right through to live. You might find that certain skills are more suitable for discovery as opposed to beta. So for example, if you have a service designer, you might tend to put them on discovery and alpha phases, where interaction designers tend to be better when you're developing more intricate prototypes and stuff like that. So now I'm going to talk to you give you some tips about optimizing team processes for better user-centered delivery. So I've kind of split this up into 5 different topics to discuss. So the first one being setting the right conditions for your team. The second one is embedding design and research into the heart of what you do. The third one being follow the user needs. Then focus on trust and communication, and then be open about what you're doing. So again, this first one is extremely important. So how do you go about setting the right conditions for your team to succeed? So at day one when I was at GDS, I saw a big badly designed but good poster on the wall that said the unit of delivery is the team. And that kind of message has struck with me and struck with the whole organization for the last 8 or 9 years since it's been going. So at GDS, we have multidisciplinary teams working on really hard problems. Very smart people doing very challenging things, and it's really important that we create a culture that helps them to do this. So I think Kevin touched on this earlier, it's really important that you take the time to hire the right people, and that is really, really hard. And it's important that you put diverse people together who complement each other. And I'm not just talking about disciplines here, I'm talking about skills and mindsets as well. You need a good mix of people to deliver, and that's not just the big thinkers and the people with the grand vision. You need delivery people there who can curtail that and bring that down the right direction. So that's really important to understand that the team dynamic and help them achieve what they need to do. Another thing, it's kind of almost a protection around the team, is you need to have principles that team can follow and refer to. So these are our design principles. They were developed now about 7 years ago. And our design principles to this day are still key to our approach. They guide everything that we do and how we do it. And where they're really most important is in our hour of need. When we're kind of flagging a little bit and we're kind of asking the difficult questions, we always refer back to these. There's only 10 and they're hugely important, and I think it's important to read them out one by one. I'm not going to go into the nuances now, but if you just type GDS design principles, you'll be able to kind of see examples of them. But to read them out loud, so start with user needs, do less, design with data, do the hard work to make it simple, iterate, then iterate again. This is for everybody, or this is for everyone. Understand context, build digital services, not websites, be consistent, not uniform, and make things open and makes things better. And you're going to see I'm kind of going to jump in and out of these principles as I deliver this talk. I've already mentioned some of them in different guises earlier on. Another thing that's really important as well is set expectations about the softer aspects of office and team culture. So this is one of the posters we have on our walls at GDS, and it tells new starters about the office culture they can expect. It's like the things that they should know but might not be told on an induction. Like that it's okay to ask for help, for example, or it's okay to forget things, or it's okay to ask why. And these things are kind of really important for the general culture of an organization. And then on this kind of topic, the kind of another really important thing is to protect the team and remove barriers that keep colleagues from doing their jobs effectively. And that's things like the bureaucracy and small p politics. So now I'm going to talk a bit about embedding design and research into the heart of what you do. So design and research should always be a few sprints ahead of development. One of our more experienced designers at GDS said this the other day, and it kind of resonates, is that I'd say it takes at least 3 research iterations, so about 6 weeks, to get confident about an approach. So if you look at a typical development sprint, imagine that line is about 2 weeks. You have your planning phase, then you have your development phase, then you have your show and tell, and then you go to the pub. And then if we look at kind of a typical design and research sprint, which kind of runs coherently with this, so you'll probably plan in the second week. So this is a team that's building prototypes. They're probably in private beta. Maybe on the Tuesday and Wednesday of the second week, they'll have a research day in place. So you'll have your planning phase, and then the designer will design and prototype. And then at the same time, they'll work together with the user researcher and develop the script for the research day, and they'll recruit some participants. You'll have your research day, then you'll do your analysis, then you'll do your show and tell, and then you'll go to the pub. And so generally these sprints work a bit like this. You have your sprint 1, you'll have your high-level design, multiple sketches and prototypes. Sprint 2, you'll narrow down that approach. You'll rewrite maybe 1 or 2 prototypes, put them in front of users. And then sprint 3, you'll choose that approach and you'll refine your design solution and put that in front of users, and yay, brilliant. The next part is the really hard part, and that's making sure that this work feeds into the product development backlog. And that leads me to my next point, which is follow the user needs. So as a team, you need to make sure that the product is being led by research, not by adding features or developing for the sake of it. So it's really important here to keep an eye on the long-term vision for your product, and while doing the shorter-term feature iterations. So one of our really kind of experienced lead PM said this to me as well the other day when I was talking about this presentation. He said, we try to drive the whole service on the wall at the beginning of each sprint just to maintain focus. And I'm not talking about waterfall delivery here where you say in 2 years we need X and we need product to do this. This is still agile, but it's trying to keep an idea about where you want to be and where you want to go. I mean, you're going to probably have product pivots and things are going to change as you get along, because essentially, as it's been said before, agile is kind of making it up as you go along. But it's really important to have this vision, because if you don't do this, you'll have a bit of a Frankenstein product if you just keep adding features for the sake of it. You'll have a Frankenstein product concept and a Frankenstein interface as well. Another thing we always say at GDS is that everyone should be engaged with the research and design process. So every person on the team, developers, PMs, DMs, product managers, delivery managers, should spend at least 2 hours every 6 weeks engaged with research. Next, I'm going to talk about is focus on trust and communication. So trust and communication is very important between roles. So you need to trust your teams and colleagues to deliver. So whether that's designer and user researcher, designer and developer, product manager and user researcher, it's really important that you don't work in silos. There should be no team black holes of knowledge. Every team, what you do should be open. So don't just throw stuff over the wall to each other. And this is really obvious stuff to say, but I've seen it time and time again. You have to really train yourself not to do this. You need to understand and respect each other's discipline. Figure out what your teammates need from you and what you need from them. I always say this to our more junior members of the design community. You should really, really hit home this. You need to involve people in your processes. You need to try and understand their frustrations and what they want from a certain thing. So the development team should know the hypothesis and research behind the design. If they've been going to research and doing their 2 hours every 6 weeks, they should have a general gist of it. But if they don't, take the time to explain to them. So I encourage all designers who are embedded in product teams to verbalize their design ideas, to state assumptions, to tie all their ideas to research, to build a shared understanding of the work that they're doing, and then to document design decisions. This one is really important because in the modern workplace, design teams and organizations are in flux. People move, people change, but the products hopefully will be there for years and years. So you need to understand the context of decisions that have been made. So that's why it's really important to document this stuff, and it's really, really hard to do it. The designer should also get involved in planning and story estimation. So they need to make sure that they know how a feature is going to be rolled out and designed for that. There should be no loose ends at any stage. So we look at, let's say there's a designer and researcher have been off designing a product feature. The dev team have estimated, it'll probably take us about 12 weeks to do, but we're going to actually release a minimum viable feature after about 4 weeks, and then probably hopefully about 8 weeks we'll have a second iteration, and then hopefully it should be done by about 12 weeks time. Never happens like that. So what happens is they'll release the minimum viable feature, and then about 6 or 7 weeks later, they're like, oh, we have a delay, something, there's always problems that come into play. Then in the meantime, there might be a bit of a product pivot because a big client or a big department wants a certain thing. And you end up at this, if you haven't designed for this first phase, that could be there for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and it might be really, really bad user experience. So it's really important for the designer to understand how this product is going to be, or how this feature is going to be rolled out and designed for each phase, so you don't have a bad user experience. The last point I'm going to talk about, which is probably the most important thing, and it's how it's really helped us as an organization to develop and work, is be open about what you're doing. And that's as colleagues with each other, but outwardly as a team and an organization, in fact, as well. So some tips to do this are use your wall space. I've been in so many offices that look absolutely beautiful, but there's nothing on the walls except for a few pieces of artwork. And I find that kind of a bit disparaging when I go into especially a modern kind of agile workspace. Don't keep everything on Trello or Jira. Walls trigger better conversation and engagement, and especially design and research walls. They generate conversations and keep people informed on what's going on. And they help improve the product as well. Because you might have, especially in GDS, we might have about, say, 20 different product teams. You might have someone from another team that will walk by your wall space and say, oh, we're working on something similar. Let's combine our research. Let's combine the work that we're doing to make this better. So this is really important. Another way of doing this is having regular show and tells. I mentioned, you always go to the pub after them, but the show and tells are just really good with engaging, obviously, the wider team and what you're doing, but the wider organization as well. So try and have them in an open space, invite everybody to them. It's always helped the work that we're doing, and I'm sure a lot of you probably do it already, but it's just a really effective way of internal communication within organizations. Next is blog about your work, including the failures. And this is something that I have to get better at. Everyone has to get better at. You don't read enough about things that went wrong. It's really important to celebrate successes, but it's really important to blog about the work that you do. In GDS, we have a lot of different blogs, but the design blog in specific is called Design and Government. So if you just type that into Google, you'll be able to find the GDS blog. This kind of leads then on to the last design principle that I mentioned earlier on, which is make things open. It makes things better. So it's really important that we create an open culture in our organization where people are comfortable talking about the things that they're doing and the challenges that they face. Everything we do is for the public and for government users. Our code, our designs, our thinking, our work, it's all in the open. Because being open means that people understand what we're doing and why. And like the road signs and tube map, by being open, our work today is being used around the world. Thanks.